Chapter 1854, End of the Rotation. Barrett suffered her first defeat against Liang Yu. She glanced at her hair, which had turned to ashes, and there was disbelief in her eyes, but then she burst out laughing. Martial artists from the Huashu Kingdom? I have indeed heard of them. She turned around, put the huge, blood-red iron battle axe that was out of proportion to her body on her shoulder, and looked at Liang Yu with crazed eyes. You people from the Huashu Kingdom always like to brag about your 5,000 years of history. Let me see what the actual level of your so-called kung fu is that you have inherited for 5,000 years. Liang Yu looked at the sword in her hand and put it away without a word. As a veteran warrior from Asgard, Barrett's combat power was indeed impressive. Her long-awaited draw and slash failed to cut off her opponent's head. However, draw and slash could only be used once, and her opponent would not give her the chance to build up momentum again. This meant that the person in front of her was not an easy opponent. In a duel between mutants of the enhancement system, the choice of weapon is crucial. The long sword is fast, but it is not conducive to weapon collisions, and it can only gain an absolute advantage when dueling Neon's katana. Her battle axe is powerful and heavy, and even if Liang Yu's long sword is made of E-metal, it will be damaged after colliding with her weapon many times. Therefore, when facing Barrett, who is also an enhancement user with full defense, speed, and physical strength, a blunt weapon is a better choice. She flipped her long sword into the crater and then took out 4 short red metal batons from the weapon case behind her. Click! 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 With a few skilled connections, these 4 metal rods were transformed into a large spear over 2 meters long in her hands. Liang Yu's spear is very heavy. The thick body is just like a long, thick metal rod, which is very advantageous for impact and smashing. The sharp tip also has powerful armor-piercing capabilities. Among the 18 weapons of the Huashu Kingdom, the spear is known as the King of Weapons, and it has always been the most powerful and commonly used weapon on the battlefield in the Age of Cold Weapons. In the past, Liang Yu rarely used a spear in battle because it was inconvenient to carry. And it was far more troublesome to make than a sword. So later, Liu Karen specially made this spear, Burning Fields, for her. When facing non-enhancement mutants, the sword is quick and convenient to use. She just needs to find an opportunity to get close and she can cut you down with one blow. But today, she has rarely encountered a skilled fighter, so she is given the opportunity to use the spear. When I practiced actual combat, the most proficient of the boxing methods I learned was Baji Quan. I started practicing martial arts at the age of 3, and in the Baji Quan school, my great-great-grandmaster was the famous spearman Li Shuwen. Following the teachings of this school, I have not let go of my fists for more than 20 years, and have never dared to slacken for even a single day. Baji Quan evolved from spear techniques. So the more powerful my Baji Quan becomes, the more powerful my spear techniques will become. Liang Yu's spear was held aloft in one hand and pointed at Barrett. The tip of the spear still had a red tassel, which slowly fluttered in the wind from the volcano. It flew faster and faster, and finally began to spin at high speed like a pinwheel. But it wasn't just the tassel that was spinning, it was the spear in Liang Yu's hands. Liang Yu moved, this time taking the initiative to attack. There was less than 100 meters between the two of them, and it was almost like hand-to-hand combat, as they could pass their weapons to each other's faces in an instant. The spear came from the sky, a fierce and straight shot heading for Barrett's throat. The powerful momentum and extreme speed triggered a series of sonic booms, and Liang Yu's body turned into a set of overlapping afterimages. Kill! Liang Yu's spear infinitely magnified in front of Barrett's eyes. The madness in Barrett's eyes turned into a ferocious fighting spirit, and she swung her giant axe fiercely forward. Boom! The tremendous force set off a furious storm, and the battle axe was about to smash the gun in Liang Yu's hand directly into the air. However, at the moment when the weapons were about to come into contact, the gun in Liang Yu's hand suddenly bent as if it had come to life, and then began to shake like a snake. It bloomed like a flower in Liang Yu's hand, lightly avoiding the battle axe, and then she swung it back to smash the blunt side of the battle axe with a force-relieving blow. The two forces collided, and Barrett was thrown off balance. Instantly, her body became unsteady, and the battle axe in her hand fell sharply to the ground. At that moment, the spear had seemed to come to life again. It had just been slashing at the battle axe, and the spear shaft had bent to form a huge arc now. Taking advantage of the rebound, it once again stabbed towards Barrett's throat. The spear, also known as the thief among weapons. Because after one has mastered the skill, it can produce endless variations, and it can even be made to bend and shake like a soft weapon. A single flourish of the spear is full of changes, and it is simply impossible to guard against. Has Barrett ever seen such a weapon before? In the era of heat weapons, the king of cold weapons on the battlefield has long been eliminated. Only a martial arts enthusiast like Liang Yu would insist on years and years of training. A martial arts master is not just a title, but someone who has truly trained day in and day out for decades. If it weren't for the end of the world, Liang Yu would never have the opportunity to kill the enemy with a spear in her lifetime. Boom! Barrett's head quickly dodged, trying to avoid the tip of the spear, but she could avoid the spear tip piercing her throat, but she couldn't avoid the spear body sweeping past her side, then suddenly turning and exerting force, smashing towards her head. The 2-meter-long spear, with just a slight push from Liang Yu's hand, sent the tip of the spear at Barrett's face like a python. Bang! She was sent flying like a top and fell hard into the lava. However, Liang Yu knew that this kind of lava, which was thousands of degrees Celsius, could not kill an enhancement-type Epsilon-level mutant. So without hesitation, she leapt into the crater. Boom! As soon as Barrett had stabilized her body, she charged at Liang Yu, enveloped in a torrent of searing lava. She opened her arms wide, her weapon having fallen out of her hands, and prepared for a close-quarter battle with Liang Yu. But Liang Yu would not give her that chance. The spear shook before her eyes, its afterimages heavy, blocking all angles of attack by Barrett. Seizing the opportunity, a simple thrust pierced Barrett's throat directly. Ka! A mouthful of blood spurted from Barrett's mouth, and she looked at Liang Yu in disbelief. Her body was suspended in midair by Liang Yu's spear, and soon her eyes lost their luster. "You should be proud that I was able to let you use a second move," said Liang Yu's voice coldly. "You must know that Li Shuwen, the master of Bajiquan back then, was known for his unrivaled strength, and he never used a second move when fighting someone. In close combat, Liang Yu has never lost unless she encounters a being with a supernatural ability index far superior to her own. From a martial arts perspective, she is almost invincible. So no matter how powerful Barrett's brute strength is, and how exquisite she thinks her weapon usage is, but in the face of a master who has been studying martial arts for decades, it all seems too childish." Another battlefield. The third member of the Fremon's pantheon, Luna Chernobog, appeared here. In the previous battle, his opponent was a mutant from a small Nordic country. But the victory in that battle was not easy. Without the advantage of a high ability index or intelligence, such battles tested one's luck and experience and encounter battles even more. However, in the end, he still achieved victory. At this time, he was carrying some injuries, but for a mutant of the enhancement system, these were nothing. When he arrived at the location of the second battle, he noticed that his feet were wet. He looked down and saw that he was in the middle of a swamp. The muddy ground was so waterlogged that the water couldn't even reach his ankles, and the muddy ground was covered with lush greenery. Looking around, he saw that the surrounding area was full of such sagua. The setting sun was beautiful in the dusk. "Okay, let's see who my opponent is this time." Chernobog licked his tongue and looked around excitedly. But after looking around for a while, he couldn't find anyone. Hiding? In a place like this? Chernobog took out his moon blade with both hands, and nothing in the air escaped his senses. But suddenly, he sensed an unusual aura. Something was approaching. No, approaching? Perhaps it wasn't close, but it felt as if something was right next to him. But when he turned around and looked around, he couldn't find where the other person was. But his senses couldn't be wrong, there was definitely something close to him. Invisibility? Distorted light? Illusion? Space ability? No, none of those. The feeling that someone was right next to him was very real. It wasn't something illusory. Hum. A gentle tremor appeared beside him. The sound was very faint, but for a top-notch enhancement mutant, he could hear it clearly even if it was just the breeze. He suddenly looked down, and saw that in the middle of the zagua below his feet, a ripple quickly spread outwards from his feet. Chernobog understood something in an instant, and he suddenly burst out, streaking towards the sky. At the same time, an incredibly large mouth suddenly appeared from beneath the muddy swamp, as if the ground had broken open, and it closed inwards. It was an indescribable giant mouth from the abyss, with a dark throat full of densely packed sharp teeth, which bit down on Chernobog. Chernobog felt a chill down his back, but fortunately his senses were keen, and he quickly used the jet pack to fly into the sky. Boom! The moment the mouth parts closed, there was a deafening roar like an earthquake. The monster that had crawled out of the mud gradually revealed its true form, which was an unprecedentedly hideous and enormous monster. Its body was so huge that it was even a few sizes larger than the super-large mechanical life forms of mechanical civilization. It had rolled out of the mud, its body covered in dark skin that was as cold as steel and slimy to the touch. A dozen huge, long tentacles danced about its body, while its upper body defied any biological classification. It had 3 heads embedded in its fat body, with a dozen dark green eyes. It looked like an octopus fused with some kind of genetically modified monster to create an even more unimaginable and grotesque creature, its appearance so distorted that it looked as if it had been randomly molded by a baby who had just learned how to shape Play-Doh. Chernobog looked at his opponent and racked his brain, but he couldn't think of any mutant in the world that looked like this sea monster. Whoever it is, just kill it and get it over with. Chernobog's forehead began to glow with a pale moonlight. He raised his moon-shaped blade in both hands and his body started to become ethereal in midair. The pale moonlight shimmered, and the figure was like the pale moonlight, dreamlike and ethereal, but the sword was wrapped in the most murderous killing intent, swooping down at the huge monster. The monster failed to land a hit with a single blow, and a dozen eyes stared at the bald-headed mutant in front of them. Moo! A distant roar came from its mouth, somewhat like the low rumble of a cow, but the sound was mixed with a bone-chilling fear. Because of this roar, the entire body of water underwent drastic changes. Drops of water rapidly soared up into the sky, turning into transparent curtains in all directions. Dozens, hundreds, thousands of transparent curtains were beautiful beyond words, giving the illusion of having pulled taut transparent plastic sheeting and then hung it up. Water gathered around the monster, forming huge water tornadoes. Chernobog roared, and his moon shadow blade slashed down at the water curtain in front of him. He smashed through the curtains, but it felt as if his body had fallen into a viscous gel, and the power that was enough to split mountains and rocks was being dissipated layer by layer. Chernobog realized that this was not good. For the first time since the end of the world, he was fighting a mutant of the water element. Because in the cold winter, there were no longer any mutants who used water to fight. He was not used to it, and forgot that no matter how powerful his strength was, he could not split the softest water current. It was not until his strength was gradually weakened that he realized he had made a foolish choice. Before he could figure it out, a roaring sound rang in his ears. He looked up and saw dozens of huge water tornadoes rolling back towards him. No, I definitely can't fall into his domain. Chernobog didn't hesitate to use his feet to pull back, but there was only an endless expanse of water under his feet, and there was simply no place to exert force. Being forced to do so, he activated the propulsion device in his combat suit, pushing him to flee into the distance. Behind him, the huge sea beast continued to roar, and the entire swamp was becoming increasingly flooded. Rumble! Splash! The sound of the water was so loud and unpleasant, it was like a broken gong being struck against the ear. Chernobog glanced back and saw a huge tsunami, like an endless wall of water, rolling back down. Damn it! Chernobog fled for his life, knowing that he could not fight in such a place. He just couldn't imagine what kind of person could trigger such a huge current in such a swamp. Chernobog tried his best to escape, but he could not rely on his own strength to propel himself, and he could not maintain flight for long, relying solely on the propulsion device. Fremon's combat suit technology was not as advanced as Zhang Yi's team's, and soon he was blocked by towering water tornadoes. Ah! Chernobog was shocked and angry. He held the crescent blade in both hands and unleashed his formidable power. Hiss! Using the crescent blade as a medium, he channeled his supernatural energy into a blade that cut through the flowing water. But fighting the soft flowing water with brute force was pointless. His power was indeed formidable, but the best boxer who hits the air will only hurt himself and not the opponent. The sea monster had already chased after him, hundreds of meters tall, looking down on the top supernatural talent of humanity struggling in the endless tide. Hiss! 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 The crimson moonlight was dense, trying to slice a path through the water curtain. However, the water wall surrounding Chernobog was growing larger and larger. It seemed that in this world of Zagua, all the water elements had been gathered in this area. The transparent water curtain blocked off the entire space. Chernobog tried to crash through their blockade. However, for water, it only needs to be thick enough to dissolve all the forces in the world. The highest good is like water, the softest has the supreme capacity to accommodate. No matter how sharp the blade is, it cannot cut through a pool of clear spring water. Chernobog's roar was gradually swallowed up by the vast expanse of water, until his body was completely submerged. When Zhang Yi appeared in the prepared white room, most of the battle was already over. After 2 rounds of selection, less than 20 people remained. The Volt Shadow Troop and Heavenly God Squad were completely annihilated. This came as no surprise. If they had not been able to stand out on their own in the past, then it was impossible for them to overcome the inherently powerful mutants with powers that were not their own in such a short period of time. Moreover, supernatural powers also had different levels of power. The gap between the talents of bishops, chariots, and soldiers below Epsilon is huge. Even if their ability indexes are the same, their actual combat abilities will also differ greatly. Zhang Yi scanned the faces of the people in the room one by one. Deng Shintong, Uncle Yu, Fatty Su, Zhou Keir, and the others were no longer here, which was no surprise. He just didn't expect Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen to have made it through this level so easily. They were faster than Zhang Yi, perhaps because of the opponents they encountered. The two of them seemed to have been waiting for Zhang Yi for a long time, and as soon as they saw him enter the white room, they ran excitedly to his side. This scene attracted the attention of many people. Zhang Yi remained calm and collected, first taking in the reactions of the people around him. Among the rules set down by the management, fighting in areas other than the trial levels was not allowed. Otherwise, it would not be so peaceful here. Zhang Yi put his arms around Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen. Okay, you guys are awesome, you've actually made it this far. Zhang Yi's face was full of relief. It wasn't that he didn't trust the abilities of the two of them, it was just that in the past, both of them had fought in support of him. He never expected that they would be able to fight independently and do so well. Lu Karen raised her small face and revealed a bright, sunny smile, her white teeth reflecting the blinding light. I've had better luck. My first opponent was a mutant from the Heavenly God Squad. My second opponent was Lancelot from the Knights of the Round Table. I easily defeated them both. Zhang Yi couldn't help but be a little surprised when he heard the name Lancelot. Back in the Demon Kingdom's underground base in the southwest region, Lancelot had also put him under some pressure. He was once someone who could fight back, but he was defeated by Lu Karen. Lu Karen proudly raised her palm, which was now covered in a layer of white armor. The small snow owl, made of memory metal, was hidden inside a metal box on her back. Only a small palm-sized face was exposed, and at first glance, one might even think she was a mechanical life form. My snow owl has a big advantage here. Its combat system is already very mature, and I've also discovered. She looked around, pulled Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin over, and whispered, the restrictions on mechanical forces here are not as strict as those on mutants. I can temporarily burst past 10,000 points of ability index through overclocking. This is actually similar to the principle of Deng Shintong's injections. Zhang Yi nodded knowingly. A super mecha that could fly, dive and swim, had a mechanical body made of E-metal all over, and was loaded with a large number of weapons from another era. And a monster that could draw its sword and fight like a human. To be honest, in a one-on-one battle where the ability index had to be limited to 10,000 points, it was indeed too overpowered. Apart from monsters like Zhang Yi, who is immune to almost all heat weapon attacks, it is hard to imagine anyone being able to defeat Lu Karen head-on. Zhang Yi looked at Yang Xinxin and said, "Xinxin, how did you win these 2 battles?" Even after being promoted to Epsilon, Yang Xinxin's abilities still have very harsh conditions. Increasing her life level cannot solve the problem of her own vulnerability. In the past, Zhang Yi would have Flower or Liang Yu protect her closely. But how was she going to do it this time? Yang Xinxin didn't explain much, just tapping her finger against her head. "Use your head." Zhang Yi laughed, knowing that smart people naturally had their own way of fighting and that there was no need to ask any more questions. In short, there were now 3 people on their side in the room. This was also thanks to Zhang Yi, who had Mu Yan, a 4-dimensional human race bag, with him, carrying a large number of Huashu Kingdom mutants inside. Therefore, even if the calculation is based on mathematical probability, the number of people in their team who will pass the trial through a duel will definitely be the largest among all the teams of mutants. I wonder if anyone else can come over. It's always good to have more people. The figures of Flower, Liang Yu, and Deng Shintong flashed through Zhang Yi's mind. However, in the end, he felt that it would be difficult for Flower to pass this trial. Flower is, after all, a battle beast, and if it encounters a world-class powerful person, it will suffer in terms of combat thinking and the application of weapons. There was little hope that he would make it to the back. The point was that with its wild fighting style, if he could have passed the trial, he would have already done so.